Right now, you could almost make a movie called The Fast and the Fearful. The fast would be the B2C, and the fearful is the B2B, because, we're cranking out AI commercials right now from Nike to Burger King, and they're testing, they're testing, throw it on a YouTube short or TikTok and see what happens. If it doesn't, make a different one, keep it moving. Meanwhile, B2B is sitting back and waiting to see what can happen. And, they'll be talking to their lawyers for the next year. Meanwhile, B2C is cranking out tests, and they'll know exactly what to do at the end of the year. And B2B is still being careful. Now, given, I understand you have lots more money, maybe stockholders going on, but I mean, so does Nike, so does, Procter and Gamble. They still have shareholders, but I think there's just a lot more boldness in those departments. And, you have B2B saying, how can we learn from B2C? That's the only answer, is just be a bit more bold and not be so scary or fearful about trying something new. We're at a place now with AI where you cannot afford, companies are going to find out. They're going to fear around and find out that you can't be slow right now. You've got to test and do things new. And so whether it's an AI generated product demo, whether it's using technology to, duplicate your salespeople somehow, companies have to figure out how to utilize the technology, or simply get left behind. It's probably cliche, but it's just still true.
I am going to put that sign up on my office, the fast and the fearful, because it perfectly describes both the consumer and the B2B type audience for marketers. And I think it's like you said, Lee, the consumer company's ability to create, test, iterate fast. Like, that's the hallmark of an innovator. And this is something that B2B marketers have an incredible opportunity to do, but they don't have to do this in a vacuum. I think one of the things that we don't realize is, let's look at consumer companies who are doing this so well and really observe some of the details, because we can't copy and paste. That's just ridiculous, and it'll make us look irrelevant and out of touch. But what we can do is learn and experience and observe what these consumer companies are doing, and then ask ourselves, how might we translate some of what they're doing into our world in a more relevant way? One, it can really shorten that time to trial. They don't have huge budgets to try everything that they do. And I think that's a big opportunity for B2B marketers is try and experiment and test things on a really, really small scale, like little micro innovation, micro experiments, micro tests. And I think you can learn a lot in a really short amount of time if you just stay consistent with those little bitty baby steps.
Yeah. Something else that B2B does is sometimes we don't have our heads up to realize what's changed and what's faster. I'm giving a talk at Content Marketing World this year about remote video production. And the gist of it is we have clients who don't even ask about video because they assume that they know what it costs. And their assumptions are based on 5-10 years ago. And that's like ignoring that things have changed, ignoring that technology has changed, consumer consumption habits have changed. They're ignoring all that and saying, you know what, video is expensive, period. I've been a CMO for 20 years and video is expensive, don't do it. That's before, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, they didn't even exist 5-10 years ago. So meanwhile, our assumptions are not catching up. And that's what happens in B2B, because you have teams that are either strained for finances, and when they ask the upper management for budget for this new thing, upper management is not in touch with new ways of doing things, and they squash it. So that's one of the keys that B2B really has to overcome, is understanding that things are always changing. Things are becoming more efficient, and that you have to always consider what B2C is doing before you squash it and say, oh, it costs too much because it did 5 years ago.
Yeah, I totally get what you say, Lee, about the cost and people's perception of the cost of video. And you may still get squashed in your company when you try some things, but I always say to marketers, you have the whole rest of your day. Try your own TikTok channel, try your own YouTube shorts, test it and get familiar and comfortable with it on your own, just as a person, because I think your enthusiasm and your own experience and your own expertise can really go a long ways to help people understand how it can work and why it can work. And I think that ease on camera, even if it's like just a little phone camera or, to do something quick and, in the moment with a customer, I think practice brings that feeling of competence, which can make you feel a little bit more confident when you go to make some of these pieces of content.
Yeah. And what about the setting up the structure of your content creation process? Would you recommend a certain percentage of effort or resource go toward a testing of campaigns? Would you recommend a certain title in-house? Would you recommend, of course, probably outsourcing to experts like you all on the line here? What are your thoughts there in terms of how can a B2B organization structurally set up their marketing and communications departments to create a brand story that is aligned with a D2C? And what are the specific tools, tactics, or structure that should be set up for that department?
I'm pretty opinionated on this because I believe that B2B marketers need to learn how to do it themselves and not outsource it to an agency, which a lot of B2B marketers aren't comfortable with because they don't know how to do this. They're uncomfortable with pushing the limits and status quo kind of thinking or the way we've always done it kind of things. But even if you eventually go to an agency for support, I always say you have to be a knowledgeable and educated consumer of what it is that you buy. And I think there's a lot of B2B marketers who work with an agency and the agency says, oh, like, here's what you should do. And like a lot of smoke and not always a lot of grounding. I'm not saying every agency is like that, but I think unless B2B marketers really understand what's involved and the potential of what's involved, that you may not be able to get everything out of an agency that you want. And then that goes back to your ROI. So if we're doing these trials, we're doing these tests, and we're not getting anything substantial to show progress or that it will work, a lot of times it's because we don't know as B2B marketers what is it that we want to get out of it. So I think just like the little baby step of where to start with all of this before we make it too process heavy is just to start every call that you have. If you have like a team call or a team meeting once a week, start between 5 and 15 minutes and talk about what are you seeing in the consumer market that we should pay attention to. So back to what Lee said about B2B marketers really have their heads down and don't always come up and gasp for air and look at what's going on in the world. But I think the collective of making it clear and understood that paying attention to what is changing, what is going on in the consumer world, and then having a conversation about it, even 5 to 15 minutes as a team, is really incredibly powerful. And that it's actually a neuroscience thing that will kick your brain's activation into saying, okay, they did it. I think we can do it. Now let me go to work and start to figure it out. I think when we get too process heavy too early in the stages of things, it kills the opportunity for ideas and kind of the spontaneity of how ideas come into place. Of course, down the road, you need to make sure that you have some structure because otherwise it's like herding cats. But one of the simple things I say that you can track when I work with clients is have a spreadsheet with 3 columns. 1, how many ideas did you get? 2, how many ideas got moved into production? And 3, how many ideas made it across the end line? Like how many are done and complete? It tells you a lot about what kind of environment are you in. Do you have a boss, or do you have a culture that welcomes ideas, that is willing to try them out, and that's willing to stick with them and work through them until they get executed? Or is it that people don't really have the skills of how to come up with ideas that relate to true, honest business objectives? So